So there's Zara Voss, floating in what can only be described as the universe's most pretentious prison cell, wondering how her life went from respected xenobiologist to alien science project in the span of a coffee break. The Keth-Mori Empire thinks space Romans who discovered steroids and really questionable interior design choices had invited her aboard their flagship, the Crimson Talon. And by invited, I mean they'd tractored her research vessel out of hyperspace and politely asked her to surrender at laser point. The cell itself was a masterpiece of intimidation meets home decor gone wrong. Mood lighting that cycled through colors like a disco having an identity crisis, walls that hummed with some kind of energy field, and a single chair that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd heard the concept of furniture described once, badly, at a party. Zara was examining the lock mechanism not because she planned to escape, but because boredom makes you do weird things when the door hissed open with all the dramatic flair of a community theater production. Enter Commander Vex Tau, 7 feet of irritated lizard person stuffed into a uniform that screamed I peaked in military academy. His scales were the color of old bronze, his eyes were the kind of yellow that suggested he'd seen too much paperwork, and his expression suggested he'd rather be literally anywhere else in the galaxy. Human, he said, managing to make the word sound like a personal insult. Keth-Mori, Zara replied, because 2 could play at that game. Vex Tau's eye twitched. You will address me as Commander. I'll address you as Hey You if I want to. What are you going to do, arrest me? Zara gestured around the cell. Little late for that, don't you think? The commander pulled up a holographic display that flickered with what looked like her entire life history. Zara Voss, xenobiologist, graduate of the Terran Science Institute, author of 17 papers on interspecies behavioral psychology. He paused dramatically, and confirmed human. Wow, your intelligence network is really earning their paychecks. Yes, I'm human. No, I'm not sorry about it. Is this going somewhere, or are you just here to practice your intimidating stare? Because I've got to tell you, it needs work. Vex Tau's jaw clenched. Your species has been classified as a potential galactic threat. Oh, come on. We've barely figured out how to not blow ourselves up on our own planet. What makes you think we're a threat to anyone else? The destruction of the hegemony fleet at Kepler Station. Zara blinked. That was self-defense. They attacked a civilian colony. The annihilation of the Zorthak invasion force. Also self-defense. Seeing a pattern here? The incident at. Let me guess. Self-defense? Zara stood up, which wasn't particularly intimidating given that Vex Tau had about 2 feet on her, but sometimes you have to work with what you've got. Look, Commander Consonant Soup, here's the thing about humans. We don't start fights, we finish them. There's a difference. Vex Tau leaned forward, and Zara caught a whiff of his breath, which suggested his species had some interesting dietary choices. We intend to study that difference. Tomorrow you will be subjected to combat trials to determine the extent of human aggression. Combat trials? What is this, ancient Rome? The Keth-Mori Empire has found that the most efficient way to study a species' true nature is through controlled combat scenarios. Zara stared at him. You're going to throw me in a gladiator pit. The combat assessment arena is a state-of-the-art facility designed for. It's a gladiator pit. Vex Tau's silence was answer enough. And what exactly am I supposed to fight? Please tell me it's not each other. I've seen reality TV, and I know how that ends. The commander's expression shifted into something that might have been a smile if you squinted, and had a really generous definition of the word. You will face the render. The way he said it, with capital letters practically dripping from every syllable, suggested this was supposed to be impressive. Or terrifying. Possibly both. The render, Zara repeated flatly. Our greatest war beast. Undefeated in over 300 combat trials. Aha. And you expect me to fight this thing because? Because humans claim to be peaceful, yet your combat record suggests otherwise. We believe that when faced with mortal danger, your true nature will emerge. Zara looked around the cell again, taking in the mood lighting and the uncomfortable chair and the general air of we spent way too much money on this, and now we have to justify it somehow. Can I make a suggestion? Vextal's eyes narrowed. Speak. Maybe, and I'm just throwing this out there, your greatest war beast is cranky because you've been using it as a gladiator for 3 years. Have you considered therapy? For the beast, I mean. You probably need it too, but let's start small. The commander stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked toward the door. The trials begin at dawn, he said without looking back. What's dawn on a spaceship? Zara called after him, but the door had already hissed shut. She sat back down in the terrible chair and sighed. Well, Zara, you wanted to study alien behavior. Congratulations. You're about to get a really close look at it. Dawn on a spaceship, it turned out, was whenever the commander decided to wake you up with what sounded like an air horn having an existential crisis. Zara had been dreaming about her lab back on Earth, specifically about her coffee machine, which made better coffee than whatever the Keth Mori were calling coffee, but was probably closer to industrial solvent. 2 guards who looked like they'd been carved out of granite and bad life choices escorted her through corridors that screamed, "We have no idea what we're doing, but we're going to do it loudly." The walls were covered in what appeared to be motivational posters, if motivational posters were designed by someone whose only emotion was barely contained rage. The combat assessment arena, because of course they had a fancy name for their murder pit, was exactly what you'd expect from a species that thought mood lighting was appropriate for prison cells. It was a circular chamber about the size of a basketball court, surrounded by observation decks filled with Keth Mori who looked like they were expecting dinner and a show. In the center of the arena was a cage, and in the cage was the render. "Oh," Zara said quietly. "Oh, you poor thing." The render was, well, imagine if someone had taken a saber-toothed tiger, fed it nothing but protein powder and existential dread for 3 years, then taught it advanced calculus just to watch it get frustrated. It was massive, easily 9 feet long, and probably close to 1,000 pounds, with muscles that looked like they'd been sculpted by someone who thought subtlety was a 4-letter word. Its fur was a deep midnight blue that seemed to absorb light, and its eyes were the kind of gold that suggested intelligence way beyond what anyone had given it credit for. Those eyes were currently fixed on the observation deck with an expression that could charitably be described as plotting elaborate revenge scenarios. But what caught Zara's attention wasn't the size or the teeth or the claws that could probably open a can of soup from across the room. It was the way the creature was sitting in the far corner of its cage, as far from the crowds as possible, with its tail wrapped around itself like a security blanket. "That's not a war beast," she muttered. "That's a trauma patient." Commander Vextal's voice boomed over the arena's speaker system with all the warmth of a tax audit. "Citizens of the Empire, today we witness the true nature of humanity revealed. Observe as their peaceful facade crumbles in the face of mortal combat." The cage door opened with a grinding sound that suggested the arena's maintenance budget had been allocated elsewhere. The render looked at the open door, then at Zara, then at the cheering crowd. Its expression was so clearly, "Are you people serious right now?" that Zara actually snorted. "I know, right?" she called out to it. "This is ridiculous." The creature's head tilted slightly, like a dog hearing a new sound. Zara walked closer, ignoring the sudden hush from the observation deck. "Hey there, big guy. I'm Zara. I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess that you didn't volunteer for this job." The render's ears, which were surprisingly expressive for something that supposedly only knew how to kill, flicked forward with interest. "Let me guess," Zara continued, settling down cross-legged on the arena floor about 10 feet from the cage. "They grabbed you from wherever you were living your best life, stuck you in a box, and now they expect you to perform on command like some kind of murderous circus act." A low rumble came from the creature's chest. Not quite a growl, not quite a purr. More like the sound of someone agreeing but not wanting to admit it. "Yeah, I thought so. I'm in a similar boat, actually. Well, similar spaceship. They think I'm some kind of killing machine, too." Zara glanced up at the observation deck, where she could see Commander Vextal frantically gesturing at his subordinates. Newsflash, people. Just because someone can fight doesn't mean they want to. The render's tail unwrapped from around its body, and it took a cautious step toward the front of the cage. "That's it," Zara said softly. "I'm not going anywhere." "Well, I'm definitely going somewhere eventually because this whole situation is completely unsustainable, but I'm not going to hurt you." Another step. The render was now close enough that Zara could see the intelligence in those golden eyes, and the bone-deep exhaustion that came with being treated like a thing instead of a being. "When's the last time someone just talked to you?" she asked. "Not gave you orders, not screamed when you didn't perform fast enough. Just talked." The creature's response was a sound that broke Zara's heart, a soft, questioning chirp that belonged on something a tenth its size. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered. "They really did a number on you, didn't they?" The render lowered its massive head and looked at her with an expression that clearly said, "Please don't be like the others." From the observation deck came the sound of increasingly frantic Keth Mori voices. Zara caught phrases like unprecedented behavior and this wasn't in the manual and, most tellingly, why isn't it attacking? Because Zara called out loud enough for the speakers to pick up, it's not a monster. It's just scared and lonely and tired of being treated like entertainment. The render made that soft chirping sound again and, very carefully, extended one massive paw through the bars of the cage. Zara looked at the paw easily the size of a dinner plate, with claws that could open her like a can of sardines, and then at the creature's face, which was doing its best impression of a hopeful puppy. "Well," she said, reaching out to very gently touch one enormous toe, "this is either going to be the start of a beautiful friendship or the shortest xenobiology career in history." The render's purr, when it finally came, sounded like a diesel engine learning to express feelings. 20 minutes later, the combat assessment arena had become the galaxy's most expensive therapy session, and Commander Vextal was having what could charitably be described as a complete mental breakdown. The render who Zara had started calling Biscuit because you can't stay terrifying with a name like that, the sweetie had somehow managed to fit his massive head through the cage bars and was currently resting it in Zara's lap while she scratched behind his ears. The purring had evolved from diesel engine with feelings to industrial washing machine experiencing joy, and it was making the entire arena vibrate. "This is not how this was supposed to go," Dr. Hicksnell, the ship's xenobiologist, was muttering into his recording device. He was a smaller, twitchier version of Commander Vextal, with scales that had turned an alarming shade of green. Subject human shows no aggressive tendencies. War beast exhibits unprecedented docile behavior. Requesting immediate consultation with behavioral psychology department. From her position on the arena floor, Zara could hear every word through the speakers. "Hey, Doc," she called out, "want some free advice? Stop calling him a war beast. His name is Biscuit, and he's obviously suffering from chronic understimulation and social isolation. The creature is a Class VI apex predator." Dr. Hicksnell protested. "The creature is a person." Zara shot back. "Look at him." "Really look." Biscuit, as if summoned by the conversation, lifted his head and fixed the observation deck with a stare that managed to convey both supreme intelligence and complete disdain for the current situation. Then he opened his mouth and spoke. Not in words, obviously, but in a series of complex vocalizations that were clearly structured like language. It sounded like a conversation, complete with pauses for responses that never came. The arena fell silent. "How long has he been trying to talk to you people?" Zara asked quietly. More silence. 3 years, she continued, her voice carrying easily in the acoustic nightmare that was the arena. 3 years of trying to communicate, and you wrote it off as roaring. 3 years of performing for your entertainment when what he really wanted was just someone to listen. Biscuit made a sound that was unmistakably agreement and settled his head back in Zara's lap. Commander Vextal's voice crackled over the speakers. This was not anticipated." "Maybe that's your problem," Zara said, continuing to scratch behind Biscuit's ears. The creature's eyes had half closed in bliss, and his purring had taken on a more contented quality. You anticipated a fight, so you created conditions for a fight. You wanted to see human aggression, so you put a human in a situation designed to make them aggressive. The trials are meant to reveal true nature under stress. Whose stress? Mine or his? Zara gestured to Biscuit, who was now doing his best impression of a house cat, if house cats weighed 900 pounds and could bench press a hover car. Because I've got to tell you, the most stressful part of this whole experience has been watching what you've done to this poor guy. A new voice joined the conversation, older, with the kind of authority that suggested it was used to being obeyed. Dr. Hicksnow, explain this behavior. Aye, that is, the behavioral patterns are unprecedented, High Commander. The war beast has never shown this level of domesticity. It's not domesticity, Zara interrupted. It's relief. When's the last time someone showed him basic kindness? Biscuit lifted his head again and made a series of sounds that were clearly directed at the observation deck. The tone was unmistakably sarcastic. What did he say? The High Commander asked. I don't speak his language, Zara admitted, but if I had to guess, it was something along the lines of never, you idiots. Biscuit's tail thumped against the arena floor in what was clearly agreement. This is highly irregular, the High Commander continued. War beasts do not form attachments. People do, Zara said simply. And that's what he is. A person. A very large, very lonely person who's been treated like a thing for 3 years. As if to prove her point, Biscuit very carefully wrapped his tail around Zara's waist, not restraining, not threatening, just cuddling. The gesture was so clearly protective that even the densest Kethmori couldn't miss the implication. He's adopted me, Zara realized out loud. Haven't you, big guy? Biscuit's response was to very gently nose at her shoulder and make a sound that was unmistakably affectionate. From the observation deck came the sound of several Kethmori having simultaneous nervous breakdowns. This complicates things, the High Commander said finally. How so? Zara asked. The war beast is valuable. It cannot be allowed to become compromised by emotional attachment. Biscuit's purring stopped abruptly, replaced by a sound that was definitely a growl. Not threatening, exactly, but clearly conveying the message that he had opinions about being called it, and those opinions were not favorable. Too late, Zara said cheerfully. He's compromised. I'm compromised. We're all compromised here. The question is, what are you going to do about it? We could separate you, Commander Vextal suggested. Biscuit's growl deepened, and he shifted position to more clearly place himself between Zara and the observation deck. The message was unmistakable. Try it and see what happens. I don't think he likes that idea, Zara observed. The creature is too valuable to lose to emotional instability. Then stop treating him like a creature, Zara said, exasperation creeping into her voice. His name is Biscuit. He's obviously intelligent. He's been trying to communicate with you for years. Maybe, just maybe, if you treated him like a person instead of a weapon, you'd get better results. Biscuit made a sound that was clearly approval and settled more firmly around Zara, making it obvious that he had no intention of letting her go anywhere without him. Well, the High Commander said after a long pause, this is unprecedented. Yeah, Zara agreed, leaning back against 900 pounds of contented war beast. It really is. 3 hours later, just as Zara was starting to think that maybe, possibly, the Kethmori might be reasonable beings capable of growth and learning, the ship's alarm system decided to prove that the universe has a sense of humor, and it's terrible. The sound was like someone had taught a banshee to use an air horn, and it made Biscuit's ears flatten against his head in annoyance. They'd moved to what the Kethmori generously called temporary quarters, a larger cell with actual furniture, and a door that locked from the outside while the High Command figured out what to do with their emotional support war beast situation. Attention all personnel, the ship's computer announced in a voice that suggested it had been programmed by someone who thought volume was a substitute for authority. We are under attack. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Well, Zara said, scratching behind Biscuit's ears as he pressed closer to her, that's probably not good. Commander Vextal's voice crackled over the intercom. All civilians to emergency stations. Combat personnel to battle positions. This is not a drill. Through the small viewport in their temporary quarters, Zara could see the sleek, angular shapes of ships that looked like they'd been designed by someone who thought subtlety was for other people. Their hulls were painted in aggressive reds and blacks, and they bristled with the kind of weapons that suggested their owners had strong opinions about personal space. Void Reapers, she muttered, recognizing the ship designs from her xenobiology databases. Oh, this just keeps getting better. Biscuit made a questioning sound, and Zara realized he was picking up on her tension. Space pirates, she explained. The kind of people who think negotiation is what you do after you've blown up half the other guy's ship. The lights flickered, and the ship shuddered as something large and energetic hit the hull. Biscuit's protective instincts kicked in, and he positioned himself between Zara and the door, his tail lashing with agitation. The intercom crackled again, this time with a new voice, rough, confident, and speaking with the kind of accent that suggested its owner had learned galactic standard from someone who'd learned it from someone who'd heard it described at a party. Attention, Keth Mori vessel. This is Captain Scar-Thok, the unhinged of the Void Reaper fleet. We know you have the human and the war beast. Surrender them both, and we'll only take half your ship. Only half? Zara asked the empty air. How generous. Negative, Commander Vextal's voice boomed back. The prisoners are classified Imperial assets. Prisoners? Zara looked at Biscuit, who was doing his best impression of a very large, very protective guardian. I thought we'd moved past that. Captain Scar-Thok's laughter came through the speakers like gravel in a blender. Imperial assets, eh? Even better. We'll take them off your hands for free. Consider it a public service. The ship shuddered again, more violently this time, and Zara heard the distinctive sound of hull breaches being sealed. Through the viewport, she could see Void Reaper boarding pods launching toward the Crimson Talon like angry metal wasps. They're boarding, she told Biscuit, who rumbled acknowledgement and moved to the door. His claws extended with a sound like knives being sharpened, and his ears swiveled to track sounds from the corridor beyond. The intercom crackled with the sounds of battle energy weapons firing, Keth Mori voices shouting orders, and the distinctive whooping battle cries of Void Reapers who were having way too much fun with their job. Well, Zara said, settling into a defensive position behind Biscuit, this is either going to be really boring or really exciting. I'm hoping for boring. Biscuit's response was to shift into what was clearly a combat stance. His casual, friendly demeanor had been replaced by something that reminded Zara why the Keth Mori had called him their greatest war beast. Every line of his body screamed predator, and his golden eyes had taken on a focus that suggested he was calculating angles and distances and probably the structural integrity of whatever was about to come through that door. The sounds of battle grew closer. Energy weapon fire echoed through the corridors, punctuated by the clash of metal on metal and the occasional creative curse in what sounded like at least 3 different languages. You know, Zara said conversationally, I was having a perfectly nice Tuesday before all this started. But, well, okay, nice is relative when you're an alien prisoner, but still. It was quiet. Biscuit made a sound that might have been agreement, but his attention was focused on the door. His head was lowered, his muscles coiled, and Zara realized she was about to see exactly why the Keth Mori had been so reluctant to let anyone near him. The door exploded inward in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. 3 Void Reapers charged through the breach, weapons raised and ready for action. They were humanoid, sort of, but with the kind of cybernetic modifications that suggested they'd given up on biology as a failed experiment. Their leader, presumably one of Scar-Thok's lieutenants, had replaced both arms with weapons platforms and was grinning with teeth that had been filed to points for purely aesthetic reasons. There's the human, he shouted, raising his weapons, and the beast. This is going to be. He never got to finish the sentence. Biscuit moved like liquid death, crossing the room in a single bound that defied physics and common sense. The Void Reaper had time for his expression to change from confident grin to startled confusion before 900 pounds of protective fury landed on him like a meteor with anger management issues. The other two pirates had about 3 seconds to process what was happening before they discovered that Biscuit had very strong opinions about people who threatened his human, and those opinions were being expressed through the medium of creative violence. It was over in less than 10 seconds. Biscuit returned to Zara's side, his tail swishing with satisfaction and not a single scratch on him. He settled down next to her and began grooming one paw with the casual air of someone who'd just handled a minor inconvenience. "Okay," Zara said, looking at the 3 unconscious Void Reapers scattered around their quarters like broken toys. "That was impressive. Remind me never to threaten you." Biscuit's response was to nuzzle her shoulder affectionately, as if to say, "I would never hurt you." But these guys had it coming. From the corridor came the sound of running footsteps and shouted orders. More Void Reapers, probably, and definitely more than 3. "Ready for round 2? Zara asked. Biscuit's purr took on a distinctly predatory quality. Captain Scar thought the Unhinged had earned his title through a combination of tactical brilliance, complete disregard for conventional thinking, and a hobby of collecting things that other people insisted couldn't be collected. His ship was decorated with the frozen heads of space krakens, the crystallized hearts of star whales, and a dining set made from the bones of something that most civilizations had agreed to pretend didn't exist. What he didn't have in his collection was a human and her pet war beast, and this oversight was rapidly becoming the defining obsession of his entire career. He strode through the corridors of the Crimson Talon like he owned the place, which, technically, he would once he'd finished removing its current occupants. His crew flanked him, a mix of species united by their shared belief that other people's property was really just unclaimed salvage waiting for the right entrepreneur to come along. The boss, his lieutenant, a Zorthak named Grax who'd had his brain surgically replaced with a targeting computer, reported through his comm implant. "We found them. Detention level, Section 7. But we lost the advance team." "Lost them how?" Scarthok asked, stepping over the unconscious form of a Keth Mori guard who'd made the mistake of trying to defend his post. "They're taking a nap. All 3 of them, as at the same time." Very suddenly, Scarthok's grin widened, revealing teeth that had been sharpened to points and then plated with durasteel for both aesthetic and practical reasons. "The war beast?" "That would be our best guess, yes, sir." "Excellent. I do so love a challenge." The group rounded the corner to find the detention level in what could charitably be described as a state of controlled chaos. Several more Void Reapers were unconscious in various creative positions, and there was a distinctly war beast-shaped hole in one of the bulkheads. "They're not in their cell anymore," Grax observed with the kind of insight that had made him such a valuable member of the crew. "I can see that," Scarthok replied. "The question is, where did they go?" His answer came in the form of a sound that started as a low rumble and escalated into something that suggested very large, very angry things were having opinions nearby. It was coming from the direction of the ship's main hangar bay. "Ah," Scarthok said happily, "they're making this easy." The hangar bay of the Crimson Talon was a cavernous space designed to house everything from small fighters to medium-sized cargo haulers. It was currently occupied by several Keth Mori vessels, a handful of maintenance equipment, and what appeared to be the entire remaining crew of both ships arranged in a very tense standoff. On one side, Captain Scarthok and his remaining Void Reapers, weapons drawn and ready for violence. On the other side, Commander Vex Tal and his surviving crew, also armed and looking deeply unhappy about the current situation. And in the middle, Zara Voss, sitting cross-legged on the hangar floor, scratching behind the ears of 900 pounds of war beast who was purring like a diesel engine expressing contentment while simultaneously radiating the kind of menace that made smart people reconsider their life choices. "Well," Zara said, looking around at the assembled crowd, "this is awkward." Scarthok stepped forward, his weapons humming with barely contained energy. "Human, I am Captain Scarthok the Unhinged. You and your pet are coming with me. First, Zara replied, not moving from her position. His name is Biscuit, and he's not my pet. He's my friend. Second, I'm pretty sure he has opinions about your whole coming with me plan. As if summoned by the conversation, Biscuit raised his head and fixed Scarthok with a stare that managed to convey both supreme indifference and the promise of creative violence. His tail lashed once, a movement that somehow managed to be both casual and deeply threatening. I have weapons, Scarthok announced, as if this solved everything. He has teeth, Zara replied, and claws, and about 900 pounds of muscle. Plus, he's been having a really stressful week. Biscuit made a sound that was definitely agreement and shifted position slightly. It wasn't threatening, exactly, but it did put him in perfect position to leap at either group if they made any sudden moves. You see our problem, Commander Vextal said to Scarthok, his voice carrying the tone of someone who'd already had this conversation with himself several times. The war beast has become protective. Protective? Scarthok laughed, a sound like broken glass in a blender. It's an animal. Animals can be controlled. You want to try controlling him? Zara asked mildly. To be my guest. But I should probably warn you, he's had a lot of practice recently. Scarthok's response was to raise his weapons and take another step forward. Human, you will come with me willingly, or I will take you by force. Biscuit's purring stopped. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that happens right before very bad things occur to people who probably should have seen them coming. Okay, Zara said quietly. I tried to warn you. Scarthok fired. The energy blast would have taken Zara's head off if Zara had still been sitting where she'd been sitting a half-second earlier. Instead, it sizzled harmlessly through empty air while Biscuit, moving with the kind of speed that made light seem sluggish, but covered the distance between himself and the pirate captain in less time than it takes to blink. What followed wasn't really a fight so much as a physics lesson on the difference between confidence and competence and competence. Scarthok had weapons, training, cybernetic enhancements, and the kind of experience that came from years of successful piracy. Biscuit had 900 pounds of muscle, reflexes that bordered on precognitive, and the deeply personal motivation that came from watching someone threaten his human. The match was over before most of the spectators realized it had begun. Scarthok found himself flat on his back, staring up at golden eyes that held all the warmth of a neutron star, while claws the size of dinner knives rested very gently against his throat. His weapons were scattered across the hangar floor, along with several pieces of his cybernetic enhancements that he was probably going to miss. Now, Zara said, walking over to stand beside Biscuit, let's discuss this like civilized beings. You want to kidnap us. We don't want to be kidnapped. See the problem? Scarthok tried to speak, discovered that having several hundred pounds of predators sitting on your chest makes conversation difficult, and settled for a wheeze that might have been agreement. Good. Here's what's going to happen. You and your crew are going to leave. You're going to tell everyone you meet that humans and their friends are not to be messed with. And in return, Biscuit here won't redecorate your ship with your internal organs. Biscuit rumbled agreement and very carefully extended his claws just enough to make tiny holes in Scarthok's armor. Do we have an understanding? Zara asked. Scarthok's nod was so enthusiastic it was almost violent. Excellent. Biscuit, let the nice pirate up. Biscuit stepped back, but remained in a position where he could reach Scarthok again if necessary. The pirate captain scrambled to his feet, his confidence apparently having been filed away with his scattered weapons. This isn't over, he said, but his heart clearly wasn't in it. Yes, it is, Zara replied cheerfully. Unless you want to explain to your crew why their captain got beaten up by someone's emotional support war beast. Scarthok looked at his crew, who were all very carefully not making eye contact, then at Biscuit, who was doing his best impression of a friendly house cat if house cats were the size of small vehicles, and had opinions about personal space violations. We're leaving, he announced. Smart choice, Zara said. Don't let the airlock hit you on the way out. 2 weeks later, Commander Vextal was discovering that there were some problems that couldn't be solved with military discipline, tactical superiority, or increasingly creative threats. The problem currently sitting in his office specifically involved one human xenobiologist, one former war beast, and a stack of paperwork that had achieved sentience and was plotting against him. "Let me see if I understand this correctly," High Commander Thex Mori said, her voice carrying the kind of patience that suggested she was about 3 seconds away from demoting everyone in the room to janitor. "You captured a human to study their aggressive tendencies." "Correct," Vextal replied, trying to project confidence while secretly wondering if there were any openings in the civilian sector. "The human immediately befriended our most dangerous war beast." "That is accurate." "The war beast then defended the human from Void Reaper pirates, single-handedly defeated their captain, and is now refusing to be separated from said human." "Also accurate." "And your solution to this unprecedented situation is to promote the human to diplomatic status and give her a job." Vextal glanced at the other document on his desk, Zara's official application for the position of interspecies behavioral consultant and war beast wellness coordinator, a job title that had been invented specifically because no one could figure out what else to do with her. "It seemed practical," he said finally. Through the office's viewport, he could see Zara in the ship's newly designated behavioral research bay, formerly a storage compartment that had been hastily converted when it became clear that Biscuit needed more space and enrichment activities. She was currently teaching him what appeared to be a card game, while Dr. Hicks now took notes with the desperate intensity of someone whose entire worldview had been turned inside out and shaken like a snow globe. "The creature is demonstrating cognitive abilities far beyond our initial assessments," Dr. Hicks now was saying into his recording device. "Subject appears to understand complex rule structures, demonstrates strategic thinking, and has somehow learned to cheat at poker." Biscuit, as if aware he was being discussed, looked up from his cards and made a sound that was unmistakably smug. "He's not cheating," Zara's voice came through the intercom. "He's just really good at reading tells. Also, his poker face is literally terrifying, so that's an advantage." High Commander Thex Mori turned her attention back to Vextal. "The human claims the war beast is demonstrating previously unknown intelligence." "She prefers Biscuit," Vextal said automatically, then immediately regretted it when the High Commander's eye twitched. "The war beast," she continued with emphasis, "is now refusing to participate in combat trials, demanding better food, and has somehow learned to operate the ship's environmental controls." As if summoned by the conversation, the temperature in the office dropped several degrees, and the lighting shifted to a warmer, more comfortable setting. "He likes it cooler," Vextal explained weakly, "and the lighting was giving him headaches." "The war beast gets headaches apparently." And High Commander Thex Mori sat in silence for a long moment, watching through the viewport as Biscuit played what appeared to be his winning hand while Zara laughed and Dr. Hicks now frantically scribbled notes. "Commander Vextal," she said finally, "in your professional opinion, what is our current tactical situation?" Vextal considered his options. He could try to spin it as a success. They had, after all, discovered that the war beast was far more intelligent than anyone had realized. He could focus on the diplomatic possibilities. Zara's presence had already led to 3 other species requesting behavioral consultations for their own problem creatures. Or he could go with the truth. "High Commander, our war beast has Stockholm syndromed our prisoner. Our prisoner has become the most effective behavioral specialist in the sector, and I'm pretty sure they're planning to redecorate the ship." "Redecorate?" "Biscuit has opinions about the color scheme. Strong opinions." "Me?" As if to prove his point, the office lighting shifted again, this time to a soft blue that was admittedly much easier on the eyes than the harsh white they'd been using. "I see." The High Commander was quiet for another moment. "And the human's official status?" "According to her application, she's requesting diplomatic immunity, a research budget, and authorization to establish an interspecies emotional wellness program, which would involve teaching other species how to properly care for their misunderstood apex predators, apparently." She's already received 3 requests from the Hegemony Council about their problem creatures. Through the viewport, they could see Zara dealing another hand while explaining something to Biscuit that was making him do that rumbling laugh that still sounded like a diesel engine experiencing joy. The profit potential alone, High Commander Thex Mori mused. She's also requesting that Biscuit be given official status as a sentient being rather than property. Absolutely not. The war beast is a valuable Imperial asset. High Commander, Vextal said carefully. With respect, I don't think Biscuit considers himself Imperial property anymore. As if summoned by the conversation, the intercom crackled to life. Hey, Commander Consonant Soup, Zara's voice came through, cheerful and completely unrepentant. Biscuit wants to know if he can have a window in his quarters. Apparently, the current accommodations are inadequate for a being of his intellectual capacity. His words, not mine. Well, okay, my translation of his words, but the sentiment was clear. High Commander Thex Mori looked at Vextal. Vextal looked at the stack of paperwork. The paperwork seemed to look back with malicious intent. Commander, the High Commander said finally, prepare the diplomatic paperwork. Ma'am? Ma. If we can't beat them, we might as well profit from them. The human gets her diplomatic status, the war beast gets his sentient being recognition, and we get the first interspecies behavioral consulting service in the sector. And if other species object to us harboring a human diplomatic consultant and her partner? High Commander Thex Mori's smile was sharp enough to cut hyperspace. Let them try to separate those two. I'd pay to watch. From the intercom came the sound of Biscuit winning another hand, followed by Dr. Hicksnell's increasingly frantic note-taking and Zara's laughter. Besides, the High Commander continued, have you seen the preliminary reports from the species that have already requested consultations? Apparently, we're not the only ones who've been misunderstanding our war beasts. Vextal pulled up the reports on his display. 3 different species, all requesting help with unmanageable creatures that had become increasingly difficult to handle. All willing to pay substantial fees for behavioral intervention services. The Zorthak Confederation is offering 50,000 credits for a consultation about their problem with aggressive tunnel worms, he read. The Hegemony Council is offering twice that for help with their uncontrollable void whales. And the Kristech Collective? They're offering exclusive mining rights to 3 asteroid belts in exchange for help with something they're calling the incident with the singing crystals. High Commander Thex Mori's smile widened. Prepare the contracts, Commander. It seems we're going into the consulting business. 3 hours later, Zara was sitting in what had formerly been Detention Cell 7 and was now officially designated as Diplomatic Quarters 1. It had a window. Biscuit had gotten his wish actual furniture that hadn't been designed by someone with a grudge against comfort, and a small kitchenette that could produce something that almost resembled actual coffee. Biscuit was stretched out on the floor, taking up approximately half the available space, with his head resting near Zara's feet. His tail was doing that slow, contented swish that meant he was happy, and his purring was set to the small earthquake setting. So, she said, scratching behind his ears while reviewing the contract that had just been delivered to her door, apparently we're now official diplomatic consultants specializing in interspecies behavioral psychology. Biscuit made a sound that was clearly approval. Says here our first assignment is helping the Zorthak Confederation with their tunnel worm problem. Apparently their aggressive tunnel worms have been refusing to dig new mines and have started what can only be described as a labor strike. A sound that was unmistakably laughter rumbled from Biscuit's chest. Yeah, I thought you'd find that funny. My guess? The tunnel worms are probably just tired of being treated like living excavation equipment. Sound familiar? Biscuit's response was to nuzzle her hand affectionately, then make a series of sounds that were clearly structured like language. I wish I knew what you were saying, Zara admitted. But whatever it is, I agree completely. She looked around their new quarters, spacious, comfortable, and with a door that locked from the inside, then at the contract that officially recognized both her diplomatic status and Biscuit's rights as a sentient being. You know what the best part of all this is? She asked. Biscuit made a questioning sound. They're paying us to do what we would have done anyway. Help misunderstood creatures, fix communication problems, and generally make the galaxy a slightly less terrible place for beings who don't fit into neat little categories. Biscuit's purr took on a distinctly satisfied quality. Plus, Zara added, pulling up her personal communication device, I get to file the galaxy's most interesting expense reports. She began typing mission status report to Earth Command. Successfully avoided becoming alien test subject through advanced application of empathy and basic psychology. Have been promoted to diplomatic status and assigned interspecies consulting duties. Currently employed by former captors as behavioral specialist. Recommend immediate expansion of psychology training programs. Also request urgent shipment of proper coffee and dog treats. Don't ask about the dog treats. Trust me on this one. P.S. The universe is weird, but it's starting to make sense. We'll report again when we've solved our first official case. Zara Voss. Diplomatic consultant and accidental war beast whisperer, signing off. She hit send, then leaned back against Biscuit's side and looked out their new window at the stars streaming past. So, she said to her friend, ready to go fix the galaxy's communication problems one misunderstood creature at a time? Biscuit's response was a sound that managed to convey enthusiasm, determination, and just a hint of mischief. Yeah, Zara agreed. This is going to be fun. Outside their window, the stars wheeled past as the Crimson Talon adjusted course for the Zor-Thak Confederation and their first official case. Somewhere in the ship's bowels, Commander Vextal was discovering that diplomatic paperwork was even more complicated than military paperwork, but significantly more profitable. And in Diplomatic Quarters 1, a human xenobiologist and her 900-pound best friend were planning their first professional consultation, and completely unaware that they were about to revolutionize interspecies relations across half the galaxy. But that, as they say, is another story. The end. The end.